As kids, we loved watching things we weren't supposed to see. That's what got many of us hooked on the WWE in the late 90s, as the edgier adult content felt cool to us young fans. Ironically, the product for adults we fell in love with as kids is now marketed to kids as we are adults. What a cruel twist of fate. So here's an homage to the most inappropriate matches in WWE history, starting with the bra and panties match. WWE had a weird relationship with women in the 90s. It started with them not caring about women at all, briefly moved into them caring with Alundra Blaze leading the charge, then moved on into fully caring about them just for their looks and assets. But wrestling is supposed to be a competition, so the women can't just take off their clothes for no reason, hence the bra and panties matches. All the craze of the late 90s and early 2000s with women's wrestling. WWE didn't care if you were a future Hall of Famer like Trish Stratus or Jacqueline, or someone with little to no wrestling ability like Terry Runnels or The Cat. Sex sells, and WWE was turning a major profit in this period. The Kennel from Hell match. Oh boy, how do we even begin to describe this one? Okay, in short, the Big Boss Man kidnapped Al Snow's dog, cooked it, and fed it to him. So naturally, this series of events would lead to a part cage, part Hell in a Cell match with actual Rottweilers in between the two structures. I mean, that happens all the time in real life, right? Wrong. And it hasn't even happened again in WWE. The funniest part was the supposedly vicious dogs would playfully interact with the two wrestlers rather than terrorize them as advertised. But also, the dogs had trainers with them, so what were they ever going to do? What was this? The evening gown match. Remember the bra and panties match? Well, what if instead of tearing off each other's random clothes, they tear off each other's very specific clothes? Enter the evening gown match. It's the exact same as a bra and panties match, except they start in an evening gown, and sometimes are in a pool, which makes total sense, because women always wear their evening gowns into the pool. It's curious to wonder how Vince would decide backstage whether to make it a bra and panties match or an evening gown match. The most memorable moment from one of these is the Cat famously exposing her breasts at Armageddon 1999, the first instance of intentional full nudity in WWE history. Vince gets a tag team victory over God. Vince McMahon has accomplished so much in his life, it's unfathomable to the average person. With these achievements and constant steps forward, a massive ego was formed. Was the ego big enough for him to make himself the main character of his own show, win a once-per-year Royal Rumble match, win his own world title, and even resurrect his old competitor ECW and make himself the champion of that? You bet it was. But why stop there? The fans were clearly wondering who would win, the God of pro wrestling or just regular God. Don't worry guys, in 2006 we got the answer. God didn't do much in the match. He had his own entrance but mainly just stayed in the corner and didn't tag in to HBK. After Vince pinned Shawn Michaels, those of us who were wondering who the most powerful being in the universe was got our answer. The Brawl for All tournament. A lot of wrestlers in the 90s were big dudes who were either legitimately tough in real life or were so big no one had the balls to challenge them to a fight. Either way, big dudes with big egos. When creative had nothing to do with several wrestlers on the roster, they thought, hey, boxing is a thing, that new UFC thing is a thing, why don't we make our own real fighting tournament? It was bizarre for the viewer because they were essentially telling us, hey listen, all that other stuff you love watching isn't real, but this tournament you don't care about, it's real. Except no one told Vince McMahon, that he couldn't control the outcome that way. Dr. Death Steve Williams was brought in to win the tournament and then begin a feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was immediately knocked out by Bart Gunn, a wrestler the company had all but given up on. Bart Gunn continued to knock out future Hall of Famers The Godfather and Bradshaw to win the tournament, completely spoiling WWE's plans. As a reward/punishment, Bart Gunn's final opportunity with the company was boxing legitimate boxer Butterbean at WrestleMania. He was brutally knocked out and fired. That's what you get for not going along with Vince's imagination. Paddle on a pole match. Another winner for the ladies. When two women get into a blood feud and want to beat each other up, of course what they really want to do is spank each other. Every red-blooded male named Vince McMahon knows that. Now, there was a literal spanking match between Jacqueline and Trish Stratus in January 2001, but there must not have been enough climbing in it for Vince. So what was the solution? Hang the paddle off a pole for the competitors to fight over, and the winner gets to smack their opponent on the butt with it. Except it was weird because the opponent would never just accept the smack. They'd have to be further incapacitated and then have the paddle used on them. Much like hair versus hair matches, the loser was never a good sport about it. The Inferno match. Fans from the Attitude Era and Ruthless Aggression Era will remember WWE's direct warnings before every show. Please don't try this at home. They must have been concerned about pile drivers and power bombs being dished out in the schoolyard. But good lord, what about kids whose favorite wrestler was Kane? I mean, he lost the overwhelming majority of them, save for a win over MVP in 2006. But this match was meant to be Kane's specialty. The ring apron would be set on fire, and the competitors would have to try to press their opponents into it. Kane, who in 2003 we found out had never actually been burned alive, ironically was set on fire at least 3 times in the late 90s and early 2000s in this match type. There should have been a second warning from WWE. Please, do wrestling moves to each other. Just don't light each other on fire at home. Father Vince McMahon versus daughter Stephanie McMahon. According to Stephanie, Vince once wanted to start an on-screen relationship with her. Because she's at least normal compared to him, she obviously turned that idea down. And perhaps this was her punishment. At No Mercy 2003, father and daughter competed in a match against each other. Not just any match, mind you, but a brutal I Quit match. You know, the same match type that saw The Rock handcuff Mankind and smash him in the head with a chair over and over just a few years prior. Vince tossed Stephanie around by her hair, berated his wife at ringside, and wound up winning the match by choking Stephanie with a steel pipe. All of this was totally worth it because it set Stephanie up as a female wrestling, well, no, she wasn't a wrestler. But at least Vince was portrayed as an asshole, something we definitely didn't know after over half a decade of seeing him on TV. Well done, WWE. Well done, Vince McMahon. Mud and other goop wrestling matches. How many times over the years did we get treated to this bizarre display? It wasn't enough to have women strip each other's regular clothes, and it definitely wasn't enough to have them tear evening gowns off of each other. What's that, Vince? Just throw them in the mud? Sure, Vince, we'll fire them. Oh, what's that? You mean literally throw them in the mud? Oh, have them throw each other in the mud. Does it have to be a match? Yes? Of course it does. This match is so bizarre because more often than not, the competitors would wind up stripping each other. Shocking, I know. But they would then be covered in mud, chocolate pudding, or on one occasion eggnog, which in turn covered them up. So who was this for? What was this? Summer Swimsuit Spectacular. We've seen matches where the women had to strip each other's clothes, matches where they had to strip each other's evening gowns, matches where they had to strip each other in the mud, pudding, and eggnog. Ugh, what a bunch of work to get to what the fans really want to see, eh, Vince? Enter the Summer Swimsuit Spectacular from Raw, hosted by semi-famous actor Seth Green. In this match, the ladies were already wearing their bikinis, which is essentially what we'd seen them get stripped down to in a regular bra and panties match. So, what are we doing here? Not much, as it turns out. Just a regular, less than 4-minute, bland 2000s women's tag match. Take my money, McMahon. That concludes our list of the most inappropriate matches in WWE history. What are some others? Let us know in the comments below.